All right, welcome everyone to the Duran Live number 11. How is everyone doing? Michal from Russia, how are you doing? From Dover, England, how are you doing? I have with me host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle, live from Moscow, and live from Athens, Greece. I have the one and only editor-in-chief of the Duran, Alexander Mercouris. How is everyone doing out there? If you can hear us, let us know. Guys, how are you doing?
Well, we're back. I'm back, and it's great to be on the show again.
I look forward to this every Sunday evening. Absolutely.
All right, let's see where people are logging in from. We got good morning from Arizona, from Michael. We got Gloria, hello from Virginia. Tweety Bird, hello from Toronto. Let's see, LA is online. Pasha from Ukraine, loud and clear in Pennsylvania. Hello from Finland. Hello from Norway. Good volume, great. Hello from the UK, from Slovenia. Hip, 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 hooray for the Duran. All right. From Glasgow. Alex, where are the pink earbuds?
Hey, I think we got. I think we have a visitor.
Laid in a suitcase somewhere. No doubt they'll turn up.
I think
Lyle from London, UK.
I think we have a visitor.
Oh, we have. Someone is trying to log on. Let's see who that is. From Greece, from Colorado, from Turkey, from Quebec, from Italy. All right, from the UK, from Santa Cruz, California, from BC, from United States, Abu Dhabi. Hello from London. Awesome. Great to have everyone here. Guys, thank you very much for logging in. Thank you very much for joining us on the chat. Let's get things going. Guys, we had a lot of questions before we started the chat. A lot of these questions are about you guys. So let's get through these real quick, and then we'll get to some of the big topics. Of course, we have midterms. We have Angela Merkel. We have INF Treaty. We have a lot of Russia stuff to discuss. We have a lot of things going on. But Peter, the most important thing that everyone needs to know, how are your dogs, and what's up with the e-cigarettes?
My dogs are fantastic as always. The smaller they are, the more attention they need. So I have 3 small dogs, and they take up all my waking moments when I'm at home. My Chihuahua walks behind me on his hind legs, and he's pushing my legs forward all the time as I walk around everywhere I go. This I don't suggest to anyone, but if you were a heavy smoker like I was, I suggest that you transition to it. It doesn't smell. It hardly bothers anyone. I don't think it's particularly good for you, but it's a lot better than smoking tobacco. So that's what I do. I just kind of puff on it. I like it.
All right. Alexander, we had a question before the show started about British people. Alexander, are British people macabre compared to Russia's?
I think there's something of that, actually. I mean, you only have to look. I mean, with the great creators of detective fiction, there was all the horror films that came out in the 60s. I mean, Dracula was an invention of the British. Frankenstein was an invention of the British. So I'd say that there is a certain macabre side to the British. And
yeah.
I think somebody, before we was talking, spoke about, we basically started the whole thing about serial killers with Jack the Ripper. So
well,
maybe it's because
you went from Frankenstein to Theresa May. I see you,
well,
John.
there you go.
Okay,
well,
okay.
There you go.
Alex, Christoforou, I think we have another guest that'll join us in the chat here.
We have Mr. Mark Sleboda, International Affairs and Security Analyst. Looks like he's trying to log on. He will be joining us. Hopefully, he gets his video on. I can see his icon on the bottom. Yeah. Let's hope Mark joins us very, very soon. So we will be having Mark Sleboda as well on this live chat, which is very exciting to have Mark's insight and expert analysis. Peter, Alexander, how did you guys get into doing what you do? I know it could be a long story, but get into it very, very quickly, if you can. Very quickly before we get into big topics.
Yeah.
You go ahead first.
Well, it's a strange thing. I actually went to a lecture. My wife, we weren't yet married, but she took me to a talk by a BBC correspondent who just published a book about Russian history, which made me so angry that she said, if you think it's so bad, why don't you start writing about it? So I did start writing about it, basically in response to this. And one thing followed another. It wasn't really planned. It just grew. And I think we see Mark. I think Mark is coming on.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Ah, there's
Yeah,
Mark.
hello, Mark.
And we are joined by Mark Sleboda from Moscow. Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
Greetings and salutations, everyone, on this Sunday.
Hello. Hello. Great to see you, Mark. I was just saying, so one thing followed another, and I think at some point Peter invited me onto Crosstalk.
Yeah,
and
no,
there it all began.
my radio program. My radio program.
Radio program. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Voice of Russia, as it then was. And then, as I say, one thing followed another, and then I continued writing, and I've never looked back. So it was very simple, really.
I accidentally fell into it. I was the reason why I came to Moscow was to work in the financial sector. I was an equity analyst at Alpha Bank, and after the financial crisis of August 1998. Well, everybody in the financial sector got fired, including myself. But Alpha was one of the very few banks that gave a severance package. So I had some money. I didn't have to get into work immediately. And one of the reasons why I started writing, it started as emails. This is before WhatsApp and all of that. I was writing group letters. I guess maybe for some people it was spam. But you know, what's it really like to live here? And comparing my experience to what you would read like in the Moscow Times. And then I started getting published at various places. I encourage people to do that. It took me a long time to actually make a living off of it because, you know, everybody wants content, but hardly anyone wants to pay for it. And so I finally started getting some paying gigs, and then it morphed into television eventually. That's the shortest version I can give you.
All right, guys. Mark, why don't we give this one to you? What makes propaganda propaganda?
What makes propaganda propaganda?
Before we get into the big topics, Mark, some people have some pre-questions.
Let me chime in on the last there. I moved to Russia from the United States, one through my disillusionment with the U.S. military and politics. And two, of course, because my wife, Lena, she's from the Crimea. And I followed her. I met her in Boston speaking of the macabre, Alexander, at a goth fetish club. Followed her back to Moscow. As I'm about to completely out Peter, shatter his reputation among all of the Duran audience. Where did Peter and I...
No, don't tell this story. Oh, no.
Peter and I met when I was just in Moscow for a few years, and I was the chairman of Democrats Abroad Russia, the official Democratic Party's branch in Russia, focused on domestic politics, helping people to vote. I worked with the U.S. Embassy here at a time, believe it or not.
Before he was banned. Before I was banned
by Michael McFaul from consular functions at the U.S. Embassy for disagreeing with him too much in public. But where Peter and I first became friends is in Democrats Abroad when we were campaigning together, wait for it, for John Kerry for president, which I believe was 2004.
Yep.
Because at the time, we believed that nothing could be worse than George Bush.
Yep. Boy, were we stupid then.
Yeah, we were stupid. We've all gone through our political evolutions, but there you have it.
So true.
You will now we will all be roasted in the comments. I'm quite sure. We were once card-carrying Democrats in Russia trying to get John Kerry elected president of the United States. There you go.
You've disgraced us all.
And that's not propaganda. So, guys, let's get to some of the big topics, and let's just kick it off with Angela Merkel. Alexander, your thoughts on Angela Merkel?
Well, I'm glad she's going. It's not before time. I think she's long overspent her time, and I think she's leaving a very difficult legacy in Germany and a very difficult legacy in Europe. I think that's now becoming, interestingly enough, the consensus. And I think that this attempt to prop her up and keep her going is going to make even more problems in Germany and going to sort of create even more of a crisis in Europe than would be the case if she were to leave now. That's in a nutshell what my view of it is.
If she had any honor and when thinking about her legacy, she should leave absolutely now. I mean, really, because we have the whole fiasco with Brexit. Now we have disarray on the continent. We, like, for better or worse, it is the French-German entente that drives the European Union. Now there's no driving force there. You want to leave it to Macron, really? Oh, come on, okay? So, I mean, this is a very critical time. Merkel should step down in favor of her successor and then have elections. We don't need this happening right now.
Absolutely. The one thing I would add is that there are powerful forces which want to keep her in position because, of course, she serves the political and foreign policy interests.
That's right. But she's the devil,
Exactly.
It was just less than a year ago that the Western mainstream media was still proclaiming Angela Merkel as the leader of the free world. All right, because their belief that Trump has abdicated that position, right or wrong, for the United States. I wonder where those media figures are today that wrote all those Angela Merkel, leader of the free world. Does the free world not have a leader now? Did it ever?
Well, maybe it's in Brazil now. I don't know. I'm ribbing you, man. I'm ribbing you.
So Peter, is Merkel going to make it to 2021?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any reason for it. I think decisions have to be made now. I think there's going to be building. Look, she's dead in the water. Okay, she's dead in the water. So why prolong this agony here? Alexander Mercouris is right. There's a lot of vested interest around her. Okay, and again, here we go again. Still another blatant example of a democracy deficit here. I mean, clearly, after all of these elections, these regional elections, her alliance partner is in disarray. It's time to move on. We need a new slate here. I mean, it's getting to the point now where this is just ego. Really? Okay. Well, I guess that's par for the course. Yeah. Okay. That's why we have Mark around.
I hope she rots.
I know you're going to do this. I knew you were going to do this.
She rots on in office, leaving the EU completely rudderless and leaderless, and Germany, politically neutered for as long as Moody can hold on. Keep going.
Mark Sleboda is my evil twin, everyone. Okay? My evil twin.
The longer you keep the EU in the befuddled and geopolitically absent position it is right now. I mean, the biggest shock to everyone when you mention this is probably, was Angela Merkel still the Chancellor of Germany?
Yeah, I know. I'd like Theresa May. Is she still there, Alexander?
Well, indeed. Exactly. I don't think she'll be able to hold on, though, despite Mark's wishes, because, I mean, realistically, now that she's announced she's going, there's going to be all sorts of people in the CDU who are going to say, well, just a moment, why can't she move aside so that we can step in? You can't hold the position in stasis, in paralysis for 3 years. It can't be done.
She can't lead now. You can't lead. Once you make that announcement, it's over, okay?
The government coalition completely collapses.
Yeah. Well,
okay. I guess the summation is here. It's a effing mess, okay, and it's spreading, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we got some super chats, by the way. Before we get to the super chat, Alexander, is May next?
Well, as I've said before,
we can only hope.
Couple of weeks, I've been saying, well, this can't go on with Theresa May, and it goes on. At this moment in time, at this precise moment in time, believe it or not, she's looking slightly more secure. And the reason she's looking secure is because of the very old story. There's no one in the Conservative Party who is at all credible to take over from her, that it's totally factionalized. They all hate each other. And as a consequence, no one can agree on who can take over. And so always we end up with the least bad option, which is that she stays. It's terrible for the country. It's terrible, I think, for the Conservative Party, if they would be honest about them to themselves. But it seems this prolonged nightmare is going to go on and on and on. I certainly don't see her going now
Alex,
very soon.
Is this because they want to avoid a Jeremy premiership? Is that what is this really what it's all about?
Well, I think that's a very big part of it. I think that is a huge part of it, actually. I mean, the extent to which certain people in Britain have worked themselves up into seeing, Jeremy Corbyn as some sort of Hannibal figure who's going to come in and sweep everybody away and change everything overnight and throw the Tories to the lions and all that kind of thing. It is really extraordinary. You have to go to parts of the media to see it. But I mean, realistically, it doesn't alter the fact that it's the Conservative Party itself which, by clinging on to Theresa May, is making the crisis deeper. Yep. And is probably going to, I say probably because you can never be sure, is probably going to cause the shift towards Jeremy Hunt even stronger. I'll say one other thing, which is, of course, at the moment, the economy has been doing, well, it's not been doing great, but it's just been ticking along. I think over the next few months, probably next year, things are going to start getting a lot worse. And then, of course, we're going to start seeing the political situation become even worse than it is now. And then with Brexit so uncertain. But there we are. As I said, you asked me the question, is Theresa May going? A couple of weeks ago, I was saying yes. At the moment, and I'm sorry to say it, I say no. And I am very sorry to say it.
Peter, you stole my thunder. Folks, there is a specter haunting the UK and Europe.
I know. That's why I said it.
Spectre of communism. Oh, it's a spectre of Jeremy Corbyn. Wait, just about the same thing as communism.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah, he's a dyed. I'm happy to say it. He's a dyed in the red trot.
No, he's old Labour. He's not that. He's not that at all. Yeah. Not that at all.
He is old Labour, not new Labour.
I'm old Labour, and I think all of us can agree, all of us, and a lot of our viewers here, we agree with his foreign policy. That's why I have sympathy towards him. On the domestic issues, I will defer to Alexander Mercouris. Okay, but foreign policy.
I am pretty supportive of him on many of his domestic issues, unquestionably so. A lot of people are, and it's very interesting to see that the way it breaks down in polling figures now, it's very, very much on age and class lines. People who are in work, people who are struggling, students, young people, employed people who are not necessarily young people, including people who, who are earning reasonably well, middle class people. They are saying, well, look what is happening to our country. It is in a terrible mess. This man has a program. He is addressing a lot of the issues that we're concerned about. And bring it on. Let's take out these utilities that have been put in private ownership and have been plundered in this way, and let's bring them back into public ownership and get them working for us.
They are absolutely terrified.
They're terrified by it. No, I mean, you only have to go. You only have to go to newspapers like the Mail, the Telegraph, and the rest, or listen to some of the things that are said about him on the BBC. To see how frightened and, of course, angry some people are about it. Anger always follows fear in this case.
On the left, New Labour, The Guardian, they're all terrified of Jeremy. I'm proud to say I knew Jeremy Corbyn personally from the Marxism festivals when I was doing my postgrad in the
I mean, the people who hate him most are, if one likes, the people in the Labour Party, the Blairites, who he has pushed asunder and who he is marginalising and who are losing control of the Labour Party.
Good. Get rid of these.
And that is really spooking them out because, of course, they thought after the 2015 election that their time had come. And, of course, they're absolutely shocked that instead of the party moving to the right and back to them, it has moved instead to the left and to Corbyn. And of course, I agree with Peter to this extent. A lot of Labour people are seeing Corbyn as bringing Labour back to its roots, to a party that cares about the communities, about people in work, that is connected to unions. And you know, we've now come full circle with unions. People are starting to see unions as good things, where before they'd been persuaded that they were not good things.
But a prediction.
So there's that element also.
Before Corbyn becomes prime minister, New Labour will sunder Labour Party to sabotage the win so that the Conservatives can win, just because New Labour's, they'll form a centrist new party, because we don't have enough centrist parties in the UK.
Okay.
Rather than see Corbyn become prime minister.
Can I just very quickly, can I just wrap up with that? Because certainly that is the agenda of a lot of people. And there are people amongst the Blairites who are talking about it. And we mustn't forget that in the 1980s, it was done before. It was done to stop Tony Benn. And it was that we had a split from the Labour Party. This creature, the SDP was created, and it had that effect. There's a fundamental difference, and why I think it won't work this time, which is that in the early 1980s, Labour was not very popular. It was seen as a divided party, and people tended to back the right of the Labour Party against the left. Today, it is the diametric opposite. Corbyn is far more popular, both within the Labour Party and the country, with the Blairites. The Blairites cannot find anybody convincing to put up against him. So I think that's definitely what Mark has said is the agenda of some people. I'm less sure that it will work this time than it did in the 1980s.
I hope you're
okay, Alan.
All right, guys, we have 500 people online, guys.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's get this moving. We have a £5 super chat from Imre Kalman. Good afternoon. Thank you for the super chat. No question is asked. We have a $20 super chat from Beatrix. Mark, do you believe the US and UK will take out MBS?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, there's no question that the U.S., certainly the CIA, would have preferred to see Mohammed bin Nayef. He was their man in Saudi Arabia. They would prefer to have seen him ascend to the throne. But that would completely risk their relationship with Saudi Arabia. For the moment, they believe this can all be wiped under the, swept under the carpet and hidden from view. Yeah, they don't want the problem isn't that Mohammed bin Salman did this or got involved in Yemen and Syria the way they did, but that he did it clumsily and got caught, right? That's their real problem with this. But they can't risk their relationship. They don't want a thuggish, troubled client state, but for them, destabilization of Saudi Arabia is a bugaboo. They cannot allow it. They will not allow it. If they have to suffer on and train Mohammed bin Salman up, then that's what they'll do. If King Salman won't relent and remove him himself, and that seems to be the case. So absolutely not. The U.S. and UK would never. Some other people in the Arab world would like to see him gone. I'm not looking at Qatar or MBZ in the UAE or many other figures in the world, but it won't come from the US and UK.
Agreed.
All right. Peter, we have a $2 super chat, and it's from Portugal the Mighty. Thoughts on Abe's visit to China?
Whose visit?
Abe, the Japanese, his visit to China.
It shows the shifting waves. I was going to say sands, the shifting waves going on now. I think it has a lot to do with what's going on the Korean Peninsula. You see the two Koreas working together, which I'm fully supportive. I think they need to just resolve their own issues among themselves without outside interference. But if that happens, and I think most of us hope it does, the U.S. is going to be the odd man out on the peninsula. And if the U.S. is the odd man out on the peninsula, Japan is frozen out in the region. So I think the Japanese, quite smartly, again, there are quiet discussions about Russia and Japan signing a peace treaty and resolving the island dispute. That it's going to take a lot. I think it can be finessed. I think it can be for both sides here. But China is in the diplomatic bazaar right now, and I think it's really very good. I always believe it's one of my main pillars is that regional problems have to be resolved by the region itself. Okay, if there's more stability with Russia, China, Japan, and the Koreas among themselves, so much the better, because then you won't need an outside hegemon. And that's people like Bolton. They wake up at night in a sweat thinking about it.
All right, Alexander, can you give a quick update as to what's going on with Julian Assange?
What is going on with Julian Assange is that he's trying to improve his conditions at the Ecuadorian embassy, and he tried to bring this court case in Ecuador, which didn't work. The Ecuadorian government, the new Ecuadorian government, clearly wants him out. They're no longer happy about giving him asylum, but the British remain implacable. And there was some talk a few days ago that they were giving all sorts of assurances that if he left the embassy, he would be safe in the sense that he would only have to serve a sentence here, but a 6-month sentence here, but he wouldn't be sent to the United States on an extradition charge. I think he would be incredibly foolish to believe that assurance. Certainly, if I was advising him, I would say don't count on it. So I'm afraid this terrible situation has been continuing and will continue. He has seen a small improvement in some of his conditions. He's able to communicate with people a bit more. He's able to receive internet a little more. This is largely because the international reaction and the reaction, I believe, in Ecuador itself to some of the steps that were taken against him was so strong. But frankly, I think his condition is bleak, and I am, very, very troubled that there isn't a much bigger outcry about this, including a big outcry by the legal community in Britain, who pride themselves so much on being champions of human rights and are really not standing up for this gross violation of human rights on their own territory.
Alex, I don't know if you heard the news in the last 24, but someone tried to break into his room in the embassy via front window and was evidently foiled by some type of Home Alone booby trap that he had set himself on the window. And the British government has set up some construction scaffolding right up against the Ecuadorian embassy that has all type of surveillance gear that no one can really identify, directed into the embassy directly at Assange. So,
well, the answer to your question is I hadn't heard about it, Mark, but when I said, it's ominous for him, I mean, that just reinforces it. I mean, who is this person who tried to break in all these scaffoldings and listening and observing devices? It's very bad. And let's be very clear about this. Let's say it was Navalny in the British embassy in Moscow. Inconceivable, by the way, that would never happen. And this kind of operation was being carried out, that way in Moscow. There would be a huge international storm. But with Assange, you have to go to alternative media basically to see about it and to read about it and to hear about it.
Yeah,
and it's a terrible thing. And it's a terrible thing about Britain. I think the British should be very ashamed of themselves.
Yeah. Earlier, someone asked, what is propaganda? Well, the Assange story is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Well, I think the British should be ashamed of themselves. I don't mean the British government, because they're obviously beyond shame on this. I think British people should be very ashamed.
Journalists should be ashamed of themselves.
Exactly.
Journalists themselves should be ashamed.
Exactly, because they're not protesting. They're not protesting about it or opposing it as they should.
All right, we have a £2 super chat from Peace of Love. This is to all three of you. Let's start off with Mark, and then we'll work Mark, Alex, Peter. And Peace and Love wants to know, why are Western societies afraid to revolt? Why are Western societies so afraid to carry out revolutions? Think Corbyn, Sanders, etc. Mark, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah,
and let's try to get through this quickly so we can get to lots of other questions.
Of the propaganda bubble they live in, and there was a U.S. Writer, Sinclair, who wrote that the most difficult thing in the world, I'm paraphrasing, is trying to convince someone of something when their own pocketbook, their well-being, depends on them not believing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Material.
I think there's a lot of truth to this. And I mean, one must also bear in mind that Western societies have had a long period of great success. And that has created amongst a large part of the population a genuine belief that Western society is the optimal type of society. There is still genuine support here. I think it is diminishing steadily as people, see that things are not improving for themselves and begin to sense that things outside the West are changing. But revolution is not something that happens easily in any society. And one shouldn't be surprised that in the West, especially in the West,
one
with
should,
the instruments,
one shouldn't hope for revolutions. I know it sounds, glorious, and it's not. It's awful. It's deadly. And it's extremely violent. Okay, why? One of the things I think I sent this out to you guys a few weeks ago. It was a very interesting article in Zero Hedge. I don't know where they picked it up from, but everyone, you always come across these reports. Like 60-70% of the American people, of citizens, have only in an emergency can't get access to more than $300. Okay, I see those stories all the time. But the story I'm referring to is people that are in the middle and how close they are to the edge. Okay, they have car payments, house payments, education, all kinds of things, and they're spending a lot of money. But the line between that stability and falling off is amazing. People are terrified of what's going on right now, and I think that is created very much like a zombie society, because the elites don't care. They use the poor as a propaganda fulcrum. The Caravan and all of separating kids from their parents. I mean, they love that kind of propaganda. But it's this middle segment here. They're the most important players here, and they're terrified because change means one thing: bad for them.
Francis Fukuyama, the end of history. And we here at the Duran, we are the last men. And I hate to tell you, but we're coming to take history back.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. Hey, make that a special one. Like a greatest hits. So that was a good one, Mark.
Alexander, give us a Yemen update.
What to say? I mean, I don't really think that things are any better in Yemen. The war is continuing there. There's these attempts now. Mark is probably, was it Hodeidah, the port that they're blockading? There is this terrible humanitarian crisis. They're still bombing. There was talk that the US is going to try and put pressure on Saudi Arabia to shift on this. If you believe that, well, frankly, you're not following the news properly.
Yeah, I think Mark should repeat what he said on Crosstalk earlier today. I think about Mattis. I think it was a good comment, Mark. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, when Mad Dog Mattis, who is the one who has called for a ceasefire and the ending of the bombing of populated areas in Yemen, to which Saudi Arabia responded by bombing populated areas within the next few hours. When he is the most restrained figure in the White House and Trump is talking about removing him because he's kind of a Democrat, then there's absolutely no hope for any decrease in U.S., UK, Western support for Saudi Arabia in Yemen, or any end in sight to the Yemen conflict. Because in the end, it's not really about Yemen. It's about Saudi Arabia's quiet, eternal war against their own restive Shia minority on the border with Yemen, in a lot of the oil-producing regions that no one ever talks about. It's a quiet war going on all the time. That's why Saudi Arabia is always buying military from the U.S., is because they're always quietly involved in a war against their own Shia minority.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well said.
All right, Peter, we have a couple of questions before the chat, which are addressed towards you, and we're shifting gears to Latin America. And so, Peter, if you can answer these, and guys, if you guys want to chime in afterwards, it's fine. But Peter, can I ask you, is Brazil, Colombia, U.S. going to invade Venezuela? And Peter, the second part of the question is, what do you think, Peter, about naming Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela as the Troika of Terror?
Haven't we seen this movie before? Haven't we seen this movie before? It's the same ending here. Yeah, a forced regime change. Invading in Venezuela, I don't think so. Destabilizing it even further, absolutely. Having Brazil come in and play the game as well, absolutely. The election result in Brazil is bad, very bad news for Venezuela. It will only encourage the Colombians as well. And who knows? Maybe the Russians will have another big base in Cuba. I mean, wow, it's just like a huge rewind, you know, a huge rewind of history here. I'm obviously making reference to the INF Treaty that the U.S. walked away from. Mark is really good on this here. I mean, I think that, you know, we just very shortly, you know, I remember in my lifetime, you know, had all these military dictatorships in Latin America, and the mantra was there, well, there should be elections, there should be elections. Well, they had elections and they all went left wing, okay? And they made terrible, terrible mistakes. Very poor governance, particularly in good times, I would say. Venezuela had more money than God. I think it could have been spent better. Corruption is endemic through all of these countries here. Governance issue is a really big problem. We can discuss the ideological element maybe at another time. But Bolton, he smells blood, and he's and obviously from what we've seen in the last few weeks, he's running the shop.
All right, guys, listen up real quick. I've got some of the users on chat that are saying that if we can just keep everyone's comments, one guy stops, the next guy can chime in, because they're saying that the back and forth is messing up the connection a bit. So I'm just seeing that as chat, just a heads up to all you guys.
Well, then you moderate
Mark,
more. You moderate more strongly.
Yeah, I may moderate a little bit more, but just keep that in mind to wait for someone to finish the comment, and then you guys can jump in. Mark, do you want? Yeah,
I did it again.
Yeah, but Mark, do you want to jump in on that previous question about Brazil?
I agree with everything that that was said. The writing is on the wall for Venezuela, one way or another. The U.S. will not stop the coup attempts. They've got enough internal dissent. Maduro's popularity is down. The middle classes in the country are revolting. Best case scenario, civil war. Worst case scenario, U.S.-backed Colombian troops. In Venezuela's capital. It's a bad situation. Unfortunately, I don't have a single ray of hope for Venezuela.
All right, Alexander. People want to know, what are your thoughts, or what's the update on the patriarch situation?
Oh my goodness. Well, there was I thought for me personally, deeply upsetting meeting between the Patriarch of Constantinople and President Poroshenko of Ukraine. I think it was yesterday, in which they signed an agreement. Now, bear in mind that this is supposed to be a question about church organization, and we see the Patriarch of Constantinople signing an agreement with the president, the secular president, supposedly, of a country. To my mind, that completely exposes the entire political agenda behind this thing. I mean, I never had any doubt about it, but I mean, it really, really upset me. I think it's upset an awful lot of people. I am in Greece at the moment. I've spoken to people here, one person, and I get the impression that it's making a very bad impression all round. But they're going to press ahead with this autocephaly idea of trying to make the Orthodox Church that's loyal to the government, and we have to be very clear, it's the church that's loyal to the government of Ukraine, the present regime in Ukraine. They're going to try to make that the official church, and given the realities in Ukraine, I am sure that will mean a violent attempt to seize churches and to take over buildings and to take over monasteries in Ukraine, and the Patriarch of Constantinople is fully supporting it.
All right, Mark, we have a question from Peace and Love. Mark, is regime change still on in Syria? Will the UK and US ever admit defeat?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just chime in quick on the last one. I mean, the latest news is that the, quote, Patriarch of Constantinople, which doesn't hear anything anymore, he has tried to, he says he wants to revoke the autocephaly of Russia, the largest Russian Orthodox Church in the world now. So I think this is the end of the Patriarchate of Constantinople. I think the issue is overblown. I think he's done. And he's outed, him as the agent of the West. He is. Oh, yes, regime change is never off the table. No, the U.S. and U.K. will never back down. It was going to be that way under Clinton. We probably would have been in direct war now it's just delayed with the neocon takeover. That is the official position of the United States. Their mission is now officially, we will not leave Syria ever. We will continue the indefinite military occupation of Syria until Iran is gone, because Syria doesn't have the right to choose their own allies and invite them onto their territory. Something the U.S. always complains about, supposedly Russia trying to veto countries in Europe against joining NATO. Well, U.S. and Israel have that right over Syria, evidently. And because the other thing is that they are not going to withdraw until they get a government that they said is acceptable to the, quote, international community, meaning them. So they're not backing away from regime change. They intend to camp out in East Syria, occupy the oil fields until they get what they want. If they couldn't win it with jihadi proxies, then they'll get it via political and economic blackmail.
Peter, can you hear us now?
Something with my earpods. I took them out. Now I can hear fine.
Okay, great, Peter, because the next question is for you. All right. We have a €2 super chat from Michael. Thank you for taking a stand for Assange. No questions asked. Thank you, Michael, for your super chat. Peter, explain to us what's going on with Trump and the threats about sanctioning Iran and what's going to happen. What are your thoughts?
Again, we've already seen this movie here. Look, if this attempt had been made at this intensity 10, 15 years ago, it might have been more successful. Nowadays, Iran has learned very, very well how to live under American sanctions. It's got oil. Okay, we're not talking chestnuts here. Okay, it's got oil
and gas.
Yeah, and gas. And there are plenty of people that want it. I mean, Alistair Crook was in Moscow last week. I had the privilege of having him doing an interview with him. And he told me, he said he'd just come from an oil and gas conference in Europe. And everyone's talking about, well, officially, we're not going to touch Iranian oil, the big oil companies. But they all admit it. There'll be a lot of smaller players be more than happy to do it for them under the radar. We have this new international SWIFT coming into play. There have been plenty of exemptions for Asian countries. It's a lot of bark. It's a lot of bark here. As I said on the program, and I said to you, Alexander Christoforou, I love this phrase, all hat, no cattle, okay? It's more that. That's such a great phrase. Rhetorically, yes. But it does send a very interesting signal. You like that one, Mark? Okay. Considering I'm like, a preppy guy, I'm talking like a
Give up the bow tie, pick up a cowboy hat, Peter. I want to see it.
So, I mean, the interesting effect for me is how the international community, the real international community, not just the U.S. and its military allies, but the real international community sees how the United States is disrupting global trade and finance. And this is going to be the real impact here. This thing with Iran, this is an old story, an old movie with the same ending.
All right. Alex, ask Mark Sleboda about the CAATSA sanctions on India, which have been in the news for some time. Recently, the U.S. has imposed a tariff on India for some food products. Do you know anything about that, Mark, or any comments about that?
No, I can get back to you on that. On food sanctions on India, are we talking over GMOs or no? I'm afraid you've reached the limit. Food sanctions on India. No, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, Peter, is there a certain part of Russia booming? What is happening in the eastern part of Russia?
Well, one of the things that it's really important. I was in a town called Tula last week. It's about two and a half hours away from Moscow, and really what they're doing, and it's belated because it was part of the rhetoric for ever since I lived here. Invest in the regions, because this country is the richest country in the world in every single sense. Okay. and getting money directed to regional development is absolutely what they need to do. They are doing it, and which means in all kinds of new infrastructure. So the real story here is it's regions, and it's happening, okay, belatedly, but it's happening. That's the future of Russia. It's regions. It's a big place, you guys. I flew from Moscow to Vladivostok. I was in an airplane for like 11 hours, and you never even went over water. You never even left the country. Imagine where you can fly in the world with 11 hours. And I was in the same country. And Moscow is not the furthest west in the country. So regional development, thumbs up, it's happening.
All right, Alexander, Ari Maga wants to know, is Russia making the Orthodox Church issue too much of a political thing?
I don't think the Russians have made it a political thing. I think the Ukrainians have made it a political thing. I think this is where the issue originated from. It was outsiders who involved themselves in this matter. And can I say, I mean, I have a personal issue with this because, of course, for a Greek, the Patriarch of Constantinople is very much bound up with our history, our Greek history. So to see a person who is embodies an office that until relatively recently was one we all looked up to, discrediting himself in this way by aligning with a political power that is essentially hostile to orthodoxy, because it is the United States ultimately that is behind all of this. It's actually pretty shocking for some people. But the politics are not coming from Russia, and that's the Russians are on the receiving end of the politics. They are not the promoters of it.
Alexander, I'm going to stay with you. We have a €5 super chat, and the question is: the Ukrainian government can murder elected leaders of the Donbass without any retaliation from Russia. What's the situation here? How's about Alexander and then Mark? Alexander, go first, then Mark after.
The situation in the Donbass is terrible. I mean, there has never been peace in the Donbass at any point in time. There is assassinations carried out by agents of Kiev. There is shelling goes on all the time. There are threats of more and more sanctions. These territories are under siege. And of course, within all of this, they're trying to hold elections. And the questioner who says that they're able to do this thing with impunity is absolutely right. All who is responsible now for the murder of people like Zakharchenko. And we see this huge outcry about the murders of Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey by the Saudis. We've heard an awful lot about the Skripal affair. But when the government in Kiev carries out, I say government, the regime in Kiev carries out assassinations, we hear absolutely nothing.
Cricket.
Right. Crickets. Mark, do you want to chime in on that super chat?
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, it's awful. I think Russia should be embarrassed for itself, the Russian government. I think 4 years into the cunning plan of a frozen conflict, and the Ukrainian government, the regime there, the U.S.-backed putsch regime, is no closer to collapse, despite how bad Ukraine is doing. And the impunity with which they kill leaders in the Donbass has morale in the Donbass so low, right? And what are they fighting for now? Just to be injected back into the Ukraine? I mean, why are they even fighting for that? They don't know why they're fighting for it. The people in Donbass are deeply in a bad situation. Unfortunately, the time for a military option to restore constitutional order to the Ukraine after the putsch was 4 years ago, and that has largely left the barn now. Plan B for the Russian government is literally to wait and hope things get better after the elections in Ukraine. That's literally as if things will get better instead of worse, right? I mean, we won't see Poroshenko again. His approval rating is below 10%. But I mean, Timoshenko or some populist like Lyash, it's bad. And there's no good options anymore. And every news story out of the Donbass after the Ukraine is just worse than the last.
All right, guys, we are approaching an hour, guys. I have to remind everyone, send in your super chats. We will answer those super chats, and we'll try to answer all your questions here. Also, go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt. It helps us out. And you can always donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. The link is in the description below. And as we're closing out the hour, Peter, we are going to have to go to you so you can open up the discussion on what else but the midterms in the U.S. So, Peter, what are your first thoughts? It's a couple of days away. What's your take? What's going on? What's the vibe?
Well, I think there's no need to talk about a blue wave. There's no need to talk about a red wave, though I may be wrong, because I've said on these podcasts before, it's the problem with the polls. There's the secret Trump supporter out there that doesn't tell pollsters what they're really thinking, and that could be 3 to 5%, could be even more. I think the Kavanaugh affair really shocked a lot of people across the political spectrum, particularly conservatives and independents. It was a shameful spectacle, and I think that's going to motivate people. Historically, Republicans are more motivated to go to the polls at midterms. The polling numbers for millennials, they have a big mouth and they like memes and they like hashtags, but they don't seem to vote. So it's really going to be who doesn't vote in the midterms. No matter what the outcome is, it's going to be rough. If the Democrats get enough committees, they will just investigate Trump for 2 years, which may have a you won't talk about a blue wave or a red wave, but you'll talk about a red undertow in 2020. Okay, because people are going to be tired and Trump is going to be saying, "Hey, my hands are tied. They control Congress. It's their fault. Nothing's happening." Okay, then you'll see Trump actually pull an Obama, and he'll rule by executive order. And that's not a good way to do it. It undermines people's faith in their elected officials. I mean, if that could get any lower, that would be amazing. So there's going to be. The outcome is going to be interesting, depending on how it goes. But the blue wave is a myth. Okay, they got a bunch of lunatics running right now. All right, Republicans traditionally have poor candidates too, but I mean the left has just got loopy. I mean, some of these people here. What's that guy's name in? Was it Vito? Well, in Texas. What Vito?
Beto O'Rourke. Yeah.
What the hell is that? Okay, and then you got this Cory Booker. I mean, the Spartacus guy, and all our favorites, Maxime. Okay, loopy. Okay, but it's going to be really, really tight, I think.
Alexander, we had a question before the chat about Papadopoulos and what he's doing now that he's taking action against everything that was done to him. Tie in a little bit of Russiagate, the Mueller investigation, and the elections, the different scenarios that could happen. Should the Democrats take the House? Should the Republicans take the House? What's your take on this tied into Mueller investigation?
Well, first about Papadopoulos. I mean, to those who have been following us and what we've been saying, this is not news. I mean, the fact that Papadopoulos was not involved in some giant conspiracy with the Russians and with Trump to steal the election in 2016. I mean, that was one of the craziest conspiracy theories that there has ever been. And it's unbelievable and very disturbing that so many people believed it. So there's nothing new at all for me in what Papadopoulos is saying. What I will say is this: first of all, he has said that he was framed. I've no doubt that is true. That is something that I personally would like to see investigated. If the Democrats win the House in a few days, I'm afraid that's not going to happen because I don't think there's going to be any investigations. But I think the overarching political story is that the steam has completely run out of Russiagate. I don't think anybody any longer thinks that they're going to find any evidence which will make it possible to impeach Trump on the basis of it. And I think that it's very interesting to see how, as the midterms have ground on, talk about it has dwindled. I think the Democrats will still go for Trump after the election if they win the House, but they'll find other things to go against him on it. I hope, as I said before, I hope the Republicans hold the House simply because I want to see this thing investigated through to the end. Well, I don't expect that.
The interesting thing about the Papadopoulos case is that he will be able to force discovery, and that's exactly what his lawyers want. They want a discovery process. Like, okay, you're charging me with this, now cough it up, show, because they haven't done it before. And this is a huge disappointment with Trump. I mean, he should have released documents, okay, these FISA documents, okay, because this is what it's all about here. Papadopoulos is forcing everyone's hand. Here's that little guy, you know, a bit player, marginalized and all that. Here's a little guy that is going to really could potentially shine a lot of light on what was going on. Okay, the discovery process is what he's really going after right here.
Yeah, can I just say something about that, Peter? I mean, you're right, and legally you are right. The trouble is, I'm not convinced it's going to happen. I can see orders being made, and I can see those orders simply being ignored. And unless there is the political pressure behind it, I don't really see how you're going to force the DOJ and the FBI and all the others.
Very good point.
Come up with these documents.
Okay,
Papadopoulos is not going to win it by himself.
Before Mark's dog steals the show, okay, go ahead, Alexander. Christoforou.
No, I mean that's all. That was my point.
All right, Mark, why don't you introduce us to your guest and also give us your thoughts on what you think about the U.S. elections and all the blue wave, red wave stuff going on. Maybe how you think it's going to affect relations with Russia, the Middle East, etc., if anything.
This is Gerder. She's one of my 4 girls, all 4 Shar-Pei girls, all sisters. And she's quite melancholic, as you can see. I'll let her down. So yeah, we have 4 Shar-Pei and a crow.
All right. Gail says that she loves your dog, Mark. Rare dog, a Sharpie.
I love my dog too, and she loves everyone. Everyone.
I've met her. She does.
Okay, at the midterms, all right, it's traditional in the midterms that the sitting president loses. It's all about turnout. Unfortunately, the energy with the turnout is probably against Trump, simply because of the media hysteria over the last 4 years. The polls show the Democrats are 6-7 points up in likely voters going in, but we know we can't trust the polls, and that really doesn't mean anything, because the U.S. is so gerrymandered politically that it's very, very hard to dethrone people from the parties from the existing seats. So I expect Trump to lose, but maybe not bad enough to lose the House, and almost definitely not bad enough to lose the Senate, which is all that administration needs. But personally, I don't have a dog in this fight. I just want to see as much chaos as possible.
It really gets down to 24 seats in the House. That's really what it's all about. But 24.
Yep.
All right, Peter, I want to stay with you. Some of the comments. Do you think that we're giving our perspective from Moscow, from a Russian side, too much, or would you say that we're being as objective as we can as we're looking at the midterms?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question here. I mean, what's the Russia angle to the question? I don't understand.
I don't know. Is there a Russia angle?
No, of course not. Okay. I mean, look. I mean, if Putin is so powerful, then why did he let Obama be president twice? Okay. I mean, it's really ludicrous. I mean, in the powers that be here, and people interested in politics in general, know that there's just going to be a different variation of hostility from Washington. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't. Trump said he wanted to have better relations with Russia. We haven't heard that for a very long time. Well, it hasn't happened, okay? It hasn't happened. And so it's a spectator sport for us over here watching it, okay? I mean, it's American politics are kind of screwy in the best of times. Now, like what Mark said here, I mean, everyone's hair's on fire. I mean, what is it? The New York Times now is running an article last few days, where is the Russian interference? It must be there. They're so clever. Okay, they must be doing it. How are they doing it? I mean, that's just psychotic. It's psychotic, all right? So everyone's just bracing themselves for the American soap opera to continue.
Objectivity in the media, don't believe in it. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. It never has. Media is all about worldview, interests, politics, ideology, religion.
Framing the narrative.
The best thing we can give you is be honest about our biases, and I think we're pretty honest and upfront about them, and to be as realist in our analysis, as separate from our commentary as possible.
Alexander, going into after the midterms, looking past the midterms, what do you see with Trump and Putin and the recent announcements about their meeting that's going to take place in Paris and a more in-depth meeting that's going to take place at the G20 following that?
Right. They are going to meet, but as we've already heard, the person who's now increasingly running things in the United States in foreign policy appears to be John Bolton. He seems to be in charge of the way in which the United States approaches foreign policy. I was hoping, as long ago as a year ago, that we might see some kind of ceasefire between the US and Russia. I just don't see that happening anymore. I've come around to the view that irrespective of who wins, this very tense period, because I mean, we've heard people say, and I agree with this, that the United States is going to dig in Syria. It's going to press ahead with its arms build-ups in Europe. It's going to intensify its pressures on China. It's now holding major exercises in the Arctic. I don't see any real indication that this is going to change. So yes, it's better in some ways that Putin and Trump meet, because it's better that the leaders of these two powerful countries meet and exchange opinions with each other. But I don't really see any great shift in US foreign policy. And I don't think one should expect it, at least in the medium term.
Yeah, because the unipolar moment is closing. That's why this is the most dangerous time. Okay. This is incredible. This is like a Hollywood script, going after Iran, Russia, China, simultaneously. Having troops illegally stationed in Syria for what? For what's going to happen next, okay? This is an incredibly dangerous time that we live in right now. It's because this unipolar moment is coming to a close. And the U.S. refuses to negotiate. Negotiations are considered appeasement, and it's only going to happen. It'll only take a tragedy of some sort to knock some sense into some people there. And a tragedy may be deadly, okay? This is not hyperbole, folks. It's not. Nobody in the mainstream media is going to talk like this, because the stakes are way too high, okay? Questioning is, do not question this narrative, okay? Because this is about as serious as it gets.
Mark, is China involved in Syria with troops?
No. There is zero possibility that they will be. China has kept its participation in Syria as not being a principle to giving information on Uyghurs that have been involved in the Turkestan Islamic Party and the other 31 flavors of jihad now corralled into Idlib, and UN's political support at the United Nations. China will be a big participant in reconstruction, which will be beginning soon, and they will have already announced that they are extending the One Belt, One Road, the new Silk Road through Syria, and that will be big in Syria's reconstruction and rebirth, but that's still a bit of time off.
Mark, and we know what the Chinese want for that.
Yes. The Chinese, of course, are very good businessmen, as we're saying.
Well, I'm thinking about the Uyghurs.
They want them back. They want them dead. Yeah. And I don't blame them. I mean, that's the same position that the U.S. and the West have about the jihadists from their countries. They don't care what happens to them. They just don't want them back. They were happy to see them go, but they don't want them
welcome,
back.
Matt. That's gone.
Alexander, yes. Mark,
the dawning of a multipolar world will not be pretty. It will not be bloodless.
Ditto.
It's gonna be rough. The hegemon is not going to willingly give up power, and the Chinese have a curse. May you live in interesting times. We will all see interesting times in the next 15-year window. Yeah.
Yep. Shorter than 15. My guess. Okay.
Alexander, what do you make of the relations between Turkey and Russia and the S-400s, and how does that affect Greece?
My goodness. Well, I think the first thing to say is that Turkey always plays, or rather I should say Erdogan always plays these particularly intricate games. It's not always easy to work out how they're going to end up in advance. We've often said that he's not a reliable ally of Russia. He's not even a friend of Russia. He has certain economic and political interests which at this particular moment in time make it attractive to him to have a good relationship with Russia for that reason. And in order to assert his independence from the United States, which he wants to keep at a distance, he is buying these S-400 missiles. But he's not a reliable friend of the Russians. It is a misconception to think of him as such. I don't think the Russians think that he is a reliable friend or ally in that sense, but it is in their interests to work with him at the moment, if for no other reason, because they need his help with Syria and they need his help with their gas pipeline and oil pipeline projects. So that is, I think, something that we have to understand about this relationship. Now, where Greece fits into all of this, I think from the Turkish point of view and from the Russian point of view, let's be straightforward about this. I don't think Greece is hugely important. For the Russians, Syria is more important. For Erdogan, he's got many other things to think about internally and elsewhere. The danger is that, as we've said many times, he is not a predictable man, and he is somebody who can sometimes try to mobilize opinion within Turkey by raising outcries against neighboring countries. And I mean, just very recently, he was saying that there was a gas development project in the Eastern Mediterranean, proves that Greece and Cyprus and Egypt are all involved in some sort of conspiracy with Saudi Arabia against Turkey. So, I mean, you have these very bizarre things coming out of Erdogan all the time. I think. Go on.
Yeah, what Erdogan does, he just makes himself indispensable in every single gambit. He makes himself indispensable, and that's how he gets leverage. Okay.
Exactly.
That's why he's not trustworthy. Okay.
He's not trustworthy. And he maneuvers all the time. And he's. I mean, give him his due. I mean, he does it with great skill. I don't think anyone trusts him, but he's still there, and he still is able to leverage Turkey's pivotal position and its strength. It's a big country to achieve certain objectives that he has.
Second largest military in NATO.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Syrians know all about that.
Yeah. Well, indeed.
Peter, we have some questions about the Caravan, and we did a talk about this actually, I believe a day ago or 2 days ago. The question is, who do you think is behind the Caravan? And before that, we have a $5 super chat from Duran 000. It says, "Read my super chats. Flaunting your political acumen when you don't even understand the allure of your chosen platform." I don't understand what the super chat is, but thank you for the $5 super chat. Anyway, Peter, go into the Caravan. What?
Yeah. I mean, this is just, politics is spectacle, okay? You have elements within the United States and on the left, obviously, don't believe in borders. They're encouraging this. There have been reports, and I want to be very clear here because we only are we're realists here, and I hate conspiracy theories. But obviously there are people helping this caravan, as it's called, or invasion, take your pick. helping them get to the border, making sure it is made for primetime television for CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and all the rest of those clowns, okay? I mean, it is a spectacle. Both sides of the argument in the United States know it's a third rail because everybody's going to react to whatever they see. And I can tell you, and this is an example of the times that we live in, a conservative and a liberal can look at the same exact video footage and draw dramatically, diametrically different conclusions from it. That's the kind of thing that we live in here right now. Obviously, this is being used as a weapon against Trump. You know, his Twitter feed, his what he has to say sometimes, very rough. I think we should have gotten used to it by now, but apparently the left likes it, and it plays into the identity politics. You know, the Don Lemons and those idiots. You know, you know, the thing is that people like Donald Trump are called a dog whistle. No, the entire liberal media is one huge dog whistle. It's the left that uses race all of the time, not the right, not the conservatives. It's the left that talks about racism all of the time. Don Lemon is their leader when it comes to something like this. Look at Farrakhan. I mean, he can say anything he wants, and the left just says, well, that's what he says, you know, all that. No, the double standard is so apparent, and it's going to play out on Tuesday, mark my words. And this Caravan story is far from over. It's too picture rich, as we say in television. There's just too many images there, you know, with men, women and children leading as some kind of, you know, protective barrier. Who they are, we don't know. We don't know who they are. Again, I got attacked, you know, when I brought up the issue of the Jews fleeing Nazi Germany and wanting to come to America. You had a pretty good idea who those people were. Who are the people marching up from the South? Who are they? And that's an abuse of asylum laws, okay? I'm all for asylum. What war are they running from? What dictatorship are they running from? What political persecution are they running from? What religious persecution are they running from? What is it? I want to know. If you want asylum, you got to say it. Not just repeat what some two-bit lawyer from San Francisco tells you to say. Sorry, I'm very motivated by this issue. Because I believe in borders. If you have no borders, you have no country, then you have no sovereignty, then you have chaos.
Alexander, I'm interested to hear your take on the Caravan issue. What's your take on the Caravan issue and the asylum?
Don't be afraid to express your opinion.
It's actually an extremely straightforward one. And dare I repeat a tweet that Mark put out, which was pointed out to me, which is, where do American troops belong if not defending America's borders? As I understand it, these people are not legal migrants. They've not gone through any actual process to immigrate into the United States. And I have to say, I agree with this issue about asylum. I think we've got to be very careful before we bandy this word asylum around and start giving blanket asylum grants to people and treat everybody as refugees. If these people are not legal migrants, then it is not in any way unusual or remarkable that the President of the United States is taking steps to try to secure people are asylum seekers if they have a legitimate reason to be treated as refugees. And I want to have a clearer idea, again, of what it is that is making them refugees. As I said, I'm not aware of a great conflict in Honduras. I know the situation there is awful, as it is across the whole of South America, but it's still a stretch to me to see these people as refugees. So this is my view, as I said, as a British person looking at this far away. It seems to me that this is essentially a situation where the borders are being secured, and there's nothing unusual about it.
Alexander, do you have a light anywhere nearby? Everyone's saying that as
I'll try. It does get a bit.
Let me pass it over to Mark. Mark, what's your take on the Caravan and that tweet that you sent with the American troops
Yeah,
logging on the
a
border.
tweet in response to a New York Times opinion page cartoon that showed American troops being sent to the border by Trump, saying to each other that they enlisted to fight in the Middle East, not in the midterms. Well, I served 6 years in the U.S. military, and I can tell you that U.S. military enlists to defend their own country, not to fight wars of hegemony and control of oil in the Middle East. The New York Times is just unbelievable. It shows their unbelievable moral bankruptcy with this. That said, it is political theater. It's political theater on all sides. This caravan is political theater. It's being used by the liberals for the midterms to energize their base. This Trump sending troops to the border, although they do belong there in general, right, being sent there now is political theater. There is no real threat from these migrants. As far as I understand it, the military won't actually even deal with any of the migrants person to person. They're going to be setting up camps on their side of the thing. So, it's not like they're serving any great security function in this particular situation. I'm a statist. I believe in borders and a society to decide how many and exactly what kind of immigrants they let into their country. But this is political theater playing to their base on all sides. That said, we know that the majority of these of this caravan, it's organized, and their denials to the contrary are it's obvious that they have organized previous smaller caravans and that they are behind the scenes controlling this one. Is a group, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, People Without Borders. They are a liberal group who doesn't believe in borders. They are a globalist. I disagree with them on that. They are funded by the CARA consortium or foundation, which lobbies on behalf of immigrants, and they're encouraging immigrants to enter the U.S. illegally, which in my mind they should be arrested. And we know that those groups are funded in part by the Open Society Foundation, yes, to a small amount George Soros, but also the Ford Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, Carnegie, the whole retinue of standard liberal foundations and tanks supporting it there. But we know most of them are coming from Honduras. They are there fleeing the conditions of the U.S.-backed coup that seized power there during the Obama administration, when Hillary Clinton ignored it and they just accepted the results of an undemocratic coup in Honduras. Now, that said, there are strict definitions under international law of what an asylum seeker is, what a refugee is, and what a migrant is. And it appears that by far the vast majority of these people simply fall under the conditions of migrants. They are not for the most part, there might be a few individuals that were actively repressed, but for the most of the people, this does not seem to be the case. And I'm not so sure it really should matter anyway. Yes, this is blowback the U.S. faces for its foreign policy in Honduras. But does that mean that all of the American people, while they should elect leaders that don't support coups in Honduras, but that doesn't necessarily result that you should just accept people marching into your country and across your border, no matter what the situation? Again, at the end of the day, yes, humanitarian concerns, but I'm a statist, and I believe in the ability of a state, of a society, to control its own borders and its own immigration. They can accept as many or as little immigrants into their country as they want, and they have to have a serious political discussion about it. It has to be a real political discussion, not this polarization we see in the U.S. No immigrants on one hand, let everybody in on the other. It's not. It's political theater. It's not serious political discussion. The U.S. political system is broke. The immigration system is broke. That's the one thing that every leader, Democrat, Republican, they all agree on, is that the immigration system in the U.S. is broke and no one knows how to fix it. Well, isn't it about time you sit down and actually started talking about this, rather than making political theater on both sides about this caravan? I'm disgusted. It's disgusting.
Peter, there's some people. Peter, there's some people talking about what you think about Trump. Maybe he's too heavy-handed because he did say, I don't know if it's true, it's not confirmed, but there are reports that said he gave the military orders to shoot if people are crossing. Once again, these are just
that, and I don't think anybody in the military would. Okay.
What's your take on some of the reports that say that Trump is?
Mark is right. They're not there. They're not going to be interacting with individuals or groups. They're going to be at a distance, and they're going to be probably more than anything else logistical. Okay. I don't think they want. I mean, come on. I mean, if they saw people with heavy armory approaching the border, yeah, I mean, they might say precautionary, but I don't think we're going to see that, okay? That's not what CNN and MSNBC and George Soros and all the rest of them want. No, they want a completely different optics there, okay? And I'm really glad that Alexander Mercouris has come out of the darkness, because I thought he was being interrogated by the FBI about something.
He was being macabre.
Okay.
There's Alexander. All right. Mark, what do you think will be the solution for Idlib, Syria, if it's to be liberated? And where will the foreign head choppers go?
Yeah. Well, most of them will end up in Turkey, but since they've been vacationing there for the last 6 years in the jihadi Disney world that Erdogan has made out of his country, you know, I will not feel bad for the Turks if the jihadis then turn on the Turkish government, because the Turkish people did elect Erdogan. That much you have to admit. So look, there's only one solution at the end of the day in Idlib. It's a military solution. The only question is, does the Syrian government have to fight Turkey along with their jihadi proxies to get Idlib and the Jarablus corridor back? And right now, Turkey is making moves towards East Syria, which is already invaded and occupied by their NATO military ally, the United States. And you have Turkey, the Turkish military, openly firing on U.S. SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, largely Kurdish proxies in the east, and vice versa. The U.S. is trying to tamp this down. But Erdogan seems serious about this. And this is the game that Putin is playing. He would like to manage Turkey and the United States into as much tension and possibly even conflict in East Syria as possible. The Syrian government and Russia have to take back Idlib and the Jarablus corridor occupied by Turkey, and the east occupied by the U.S. Well, rather than fight both at the same time, best thing to do is to maneuver them into fighting each other first, and then deal with whoever's left over in whatever way you have to. But in Idlib, you can't politically deal with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Al-Qaeda, and the Turkestan Islamic Party or anyone else. At the end of the day, there will only be a military solution, a political paper-overing after the military solution, of course. But the only question is, will the Syrian government have to kill Turkish troops as well as their jihadi proxies?
Mark is absolutely right. Your adversary in a circular firing squad, stay out of the way.
Alexander, what's your take?
No, Mark is absolutely right. The idea that you can agree a political solution with Al-Qaeda, which is the organization that controls Idlib, is an absolutely fantastic. They will never agree to a political solution, because that is completely contrary to what
annihilation. They would be
so the only question is, therefore, how are they going to be driven? Have to be driven out by military means. Will the Turks protect them, which is effectively what they have been doing, or will they step aside and let the Syrian army go in and clear them out? And if the Syrian army does go in and clear them out, where will they go? I mean, because again, it's difficult to see these people surrendering to the Syrian army. So where will they go? Will they go to Turkey? What will happen to them if they do go into Turkey? But this is an extremely intricate and very complicated game. And we will see how it evolves over the next few weeks. The only thing I'm going to say, and this is where Mark and I think, see things in a slightly different way, in fact, in a different way. I tend to see that the Syrians and the Russians, in the end, tend to come out on top of these diplomatic complications, which have involved the Turks and the US in Syria. So I expect Idlib eventually, through military means, to be returned to the Syrian government's control. I think Mark is less optimistic. That's possibly being, that's possibly a bit of an understatement.
As usual from you.
Always.
Alexander, give us an update on the Skripals, if there is any.
Where are they?
Oh dear. Well, I mean, actually, that's a good question. Where are they? Where are they? I mean, can I say something? I mean, you know, we've heard an awful lot of things, you know, about people who are photographs of supposed GRU officers. I don't know if these people are GRU officers, and photographs of passports. We don't have the originals of these passports. We only have photographs of them. Can we please disregard all of that? There is no secure provenance to any of that information. The only reliable piece of information is some CCTV film, which to my mind shows nothing. The big question is, what has happened to Sergei and Yulia Skripal? They are supposedly victims. They are also the primary witnesses. The police, the Metropolitan Police, are not confirming or even debating or commenting on any of all of these speculations we have seen. So the big question remains and continues: what has happened to Sergei and Yulia Skripal? I don't know. I don't know anybody who knows. They have vanished into a black hole. And again, that is something that should concern people a great deal.
But we do know the following, though. We do know all of the actions that the British government has taken against Russia. That is transparent. That's transparent. The rest of it,
it's completely transparent. I mean, yeah, the politics of this have been terrible. And of course, and you know, we've discussed this before. I mean, it's supposed to be a police investigation, which the politicians, the British government, has completely misused and taken over. And again, it is astonishing to me that people in Britain, outside alternative media, are not saying that. That is a major concern. One should be also concerned about, you know, the Skripals themselves, and of course about the damage that has been done to British-Russian relations. But if you want me to say that whether, you know, we're any closer to the truth about this, we're not, and we're no closer to any outcome of the investigation. And I don't believe we ever will be. I think we have reached that point now where this story has served its political usefulness. And I don't think there's much more mileage to be gained. So I don't think that we're going to see any more major revelations, at least for a while. And as for the truth, I don't expect to ever know it.
All right, we have a £9.99 super chat from Fender. Mark, to all you, can you please assure me that Russia's military technology is superior to NATO's and not just hype? Also, how sure can we be about Russian and Chinese gold holdings? Yeah. Vaping in my Duran t-shirt. All right.
No, Russian military technology on the whole is not superior to the United States. It's not. Select pieces of Russian military equipment are superior to what in the United States. In particular, the S-400s and the S-500s and other pieces of Russian air defense technology. The U.S. invested huge amounts of money into stealth bombers, stealth fighters, the like. Russia and the Soviet Union, and before it, invested just as much money into technology to defend against those things, which is why Russia has such good air defense and why the Patriot is such a piece of species.
Whatever.
One of the other areas that Russia has superior technology is electronic warfare. And you can find plenty of articles on that by U.S. military thinkers, generals on the time, always lamenting about the superior capabilities of Russian electronic warfare. There are other select pieces we can talk about, who has the best top fighter aircraft. Overall, the U.S. spending 11 times as much money, right? Of course, has superior military technology, but Russia has a shorter and less expensive chain to get new developments into production in relatively smaller numbers than the United States, which lets them bring new advances to the fore quicker and cheaper. Plus, Russia doesn't have to play, imperial game of trying to rule and provide full spectrum dominance of the entire globe. Yes, the United States conventionally could wipe the floor with Russia if they could concentrate every military force they have on the planet into an invasion of Russia, which they can't do. So, these questions are moot. In Russia's back door, neighborhood, which is where any conflict would be, Russia has some really good advantages. And this new hypersonic weapons, hypersonic glide vehicles that Russia and other things, underwater drones that Russia is putting into production and deployment now, they may very well be a little bit ahead of the United States in this game. Again, the imperative beat U.S. missile defense erected in Poland and Romania, South Korea, and so on. And, again, this shorter chain from development to, the finished product and deployment. What was the second question?
Russia and Chinese
gold reserves.
Oh, yeah, they're significant, right? They're not ready to go completely off the dollar at this point, but Russia and China are clearly, ever increasing their amount of gold reserves and divesting themselves from the dollar. Russia's doing it a little bit faster than China at this point. China has a different game to play because they have a different economic relationship with the U.S. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Russia is not going to be completely independent from the petrodollar next year, but this is all about incremental steps, and the steps at this point are undeniable, and they are at such a level that Russia has proven itself able to weather all of the West's sanctions, oil warfare from Saudi Arabia with a very slight recession and come out of it while sanctions continue into very mild but growth. So the Russian economy is self-sufficient and sustainable at this point, and they've proven that they cannot be economically blackmailed by the U.S. And that you can't contain Russia's economy. The U.S. can't do it, not without tanking the entirety of the world's energy market, which they're not.
They've actually insulated themselves. They learned the very, very hard lessons of 2008. Insulated themselves from this. Got the oligarchs to get out of the toxic financial system in the city of London, et cetera, et cetera. And in 10 years they learned their lesson. They've identified their vulnerabilities, and now they've been able to insulate from a lot. Mark's absolutely right. Mark's absolutely right. If they want to crash the Russia's energy sector, they crash the global energy sector. Okay.
The U.S. and the West forced Russia's elite in this. They did not want to have an economy separate from the West. The West is forcing them to it, and I thank them for making the Russian elite decouple themselves from the Western economy. Thank you.
Yeah, that is the sanction. Mark and I have said this before on Crosstalk. I mean, and I think it surprises a lot of people and say sanctions, bring it on, because then it creates. It has its own import substitution. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Mid to long term, this is absolutely a good thing.
Alexander, I know you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, which is that for Russia, the 2008 financial crisis just in time. Had the Russian economy continued to grow in the way that it was growing before 2008, it would have become much more integrated into the Western economy than it did, and it would have been far more vulnerable to Western sanctions than it was, because the Russians saw what happened in 2008, saw the way a financial crisis in the United States affected their economy, and that was a terrible, I mean, their stock market almost crashed, their banks went under the ruble strain. I was following it all very, very closely. But afterwards, in 2008, they started to let our financial system work, and they started to change it. They started to prioritize inflation reduction. They already began to take many of the steps that Mark and Peter had been talking about before 2014. And one of the big mistakes that the Western powers made in 2014 was that they imagined they were dealing with the Russian economy as it was pre-2008 and hadn't appreciated the steps the Russians had already taken, paying off debt, piling up reserves, building up savings to insulate themselves already from the kind of pressures they were placed under. Now, what has happened since is that because of the sanctions, that process has accelerated markedly. And I'm going to say something else, which is, yes, at the moment, growth is relatively slow because we're still in a transition phase. Interest rates are still very high. Savings still haven't been built up fully. The banking system still has many problems. But from about 2020, 2021, you are going to see, I am pretty confident of marked economic growth in Russia. And that is what the government is predicting, and I am absolutely sure it is right.
Right. Don't forget, the unsung hero of the Russian economy is agriculture, everybody. Absolutely. Agriculture is turning into the breadbasket of the world. It's a remarkable thing. The Soviets just totally decimated agriculture. They've recovered from it, and it's not GMO. It's good stuff. It's real stuff. It's an unsung victory of the Russian economy since 1991.
Yeah, we have incredible organic fruit and vegetables in this country that you simply can't get in the United States without pesticides, without GMO, what we used to actually call food, you know.
Alexander from Afro Priapus, a question. How, and I'll try to shorten it out and get the feel of it. How can any country sustain population growth and influence without influencing hunger and criminals outside of printing bonds, and and looking at China to print bonds as well? Is it rigged?
Well, can I just say something about China? I mean, one of the things about population, Mao Zedong once said this, was, you know, for every belly, there is a pair of hands. I mean, you can work, you can do a great deal with an economy to absorb population growth. Or population growth can be satisfied through many means. It doesn't have to be an economic and demographic crisis. And we've seen this repeatedly happen around the world. Now, the Chinese, of course, took strong measures. They imposed in a very ferocious way a one-child policy. They developed their economy. They integrated it with the outside world by becoming a great trading economy. They're now re-pivoting towards Russia, which can indeed provide what they need, and they can trade with Russia. So there are lots of things countries can do. And I don't think that piling on credit and printing money is at all the way to go. And to the extent that these sort of things are what has been happening, perhaps in certain Western countries, most of all, it is piling all sorts of problems on top of itself. The great problem with population growth, in my opinion, running out of food or anything of that kind, it is carbon releases and trying to control or contain the effect on climate.
All right, we got a 10 euro super chat from Michael. Thank you very much, Michael. And Peter, how powerful and how much influence does the Atlantic Council have?
Oh, I think it has considerable. Hey, look, it's the fact checker now for Facebook. I mean, that's a pretty powerful position. You know, Facebook has outsourced fact checking to an organization that is neocon to its core. It picks winners and losers. It picks friends and enemies. They're very well funded. It's basically the PR arm of NATO. Governments, all Western governments, and NATO itself funds the Atlantic Council. So if you got a job there, that's a cherry pick job, okay? And it's a real propaganda outfit. I mean, they're there to win hearts and minds, okay? That's exactly what they do. So, and you know what? They're pretty transparent. I mean, if you dig deep in what they have to say, they'll tell you exactly what they want. They want regime change there, regime change there. I mean, they're highly motivated, okay? Well-funded, well-connected.
All right, Mark, from Michael Julian. Mark, what's up? How's your family in Donbass? I'm glad you're here live. My best wishes to you and your family in Donbass, Crimea. What should Putin's next move be vis-a-vis Trump and NATO's Baltic encroachment?
Yeah, the family in Donbass, and even more of them in Crimea, Kharkov, Odessa, they're all surviving. I'm not going to say the ones in Crimea have by far the best economic and social situation by far right now. The ones in Donbass, the worst. When I speak of morale being very low and very depressed, resentful feeling to the way the Russian government has, protected them, not protected them. In this situation and what they've done, and it's not a good situation. So that's why I'm a bit more pessimistic and have been from the beginning on the frozen conflict. Not so frozen in the Donbass. But what was the second part of the question?
The second part was, what should Russia and Putin do vis-a-vis the NATO's encroachment towards the Baltics?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Russia doesn't need the Baltics, right? They're gonna pile up troops there, right? But Europe is not willing to fund it. Trump doesn't want to fund it. The European countries still want to pay more for their defense. Right now, it's still the numbers of troops are in a token of thousands. The only conceivable situation I could see where Russia goes into the Baltics is that conventional war has broken out with the West somewhere else over something, and Russia needs to take the Baltic ports for strategic reasons to prevent the U.S. from landing. But then we're in such a situation, we're already in such a situation that, we're probably one decision away from all-out global thermonuclear war at that point, so it really doesn't make any difference. But when it comes to Baltics and Poland, the best thing that the Soviet Union ever did was get rid of them. Let the West have them. Let them their fill of them, right? Russia doesn't want them. Russia doesn't care about their animosity. Russia doesn't really care about them, period. There is a concern for, the Russian minority population, the language rights, the citizenship rights. We still have, millions, hundreds of thousands in the low millions of non-citizens in the Baltics. I mean, this is incredible. Of course, the EU doesn't want to talk about it, but there is essentially an apartheid system against Russian speakers in the Baltics, and it's not getting any better. It's slowly getting worse. The situation in Ukraine is rapidly getting worse as they're banning public use of the Russian language in many regions. But militarily, Russia, of course, has to make a tit-for-tat maneuver of, some deployment of troops that would effectively counter the, increasing, hangout of U.S. troops in the Baltics and so on. But quite often, to be perfectly honest, these were already plans for military redeployment under Russia's new strategic things and are just presented as responses. There is not a serious military threat to the Baltics yet. From the Baltics, the biggest danger would be, again, with conventional warfare breaks out, would be a threat to Kaliningrad. And Russia has taken steps there with the Iskander and other systems. But overall, we're talking big thing. The biggest Russian response to, the U.S. playing around in political theater with token numbers of troops sent to the Baltics as human sacrifices is roll their eyes. They should roll their eyes and say, "Oh, here we go again."
Well, the interesting thing here is that it's actually more than military.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the U.S. has this phobia, and Trump didn't invent it, but he gave it a common parlance. What is NATO for? And that debate has been around since the end of the Warsaw Pact. But the U.S. is terrified of not having NATO unity under its control. Now they have their willing puppets, Poland and the Baltic republics, okay? Because Poland and the Baltic republics, when they look at EU and they look at the NATO, they're very much conflated. And the Baltics and Poland feel like they didn't really get a fair shake for being part of the alliance, for being part of the EU. And the US gives them that extra confidence. So this is a political ploy more than military. Mark is absolutely right. What should Russia do? Watch. Okay? Because it has no interest in the Baltics whatsoever. I have said before, if the 3 Baltic republics had a referendum about becoming part of Russia, and if it passed 99%, the Russians would say, "No thanks, we're not interested at all. You're NATO's problem, you're the EU's problem, you're not our problem now."
All right, Bobby gave us a $2 super chat, no question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Alexander, will the EU turn to Russia now with the problems in the INF Treaty?
No, they won't turn to Russia. I think that is delusional. I was reading a article in Der Spiegel by the German Foreign Minister, Mr. Haas, which I think some people have interpreted in that way, but I didn't read it like that at all. I think that the European Union will accept the departure of the INF Treaty. I think that this is not going to be the galvanizing thing that some people are talking about. What I think is going to happen is we're going to see more and more of this security architecture, this nuclear security architecture that was created during the Cold War taken apart. The only thing that might change that is if the United States makes the mistake of placing intermediate range nuclear weapons in Germany again, or Britain, or Poland. If they do that, that will provoke a reaction in Europe. Not, I should stress, at the level of the EU authorities, perhaps, but at the level of grassroots opinion. But simply withdrawing from the INF Treaty, if that is as far as it goes, I don't think that's going to make much of a difference.
And Alexander, I'm going to stay with you for another question from Andreas Ioriou. He wants to know, Turkey will not allow the exploitation of gas reserves in Turkish and North Cypriot waters. President Erdogan said on Sunday. Any view on where this is heading?
Yeah, I'm afraid you have to repeat the question because there was some interference, Alex.
Erdogan said that Turkey will not allow the exploitation of gas reserves in northern Cypriot waters. Any idea where this is heading?
Well, I think that anything Erdogan says has to be taken seriously because, as I've said many times, he's a dangerous man and he's volatile. I don't think he's going to over gas development in Cypriot waters, but I think that what making those sort of threats will do is that they will deter companies from exploring and working there. Because, of course, the one thing that oil and gas companies do not like to do is operate in conflict zones. So I think that is what all that is all about. Now, whether we can perhaps, in looking into the future, see some sort of deal being done around this, I don't know. But there are political problems to such a deal, because, of course, if Erdogan makes demands which encroach on the sovereignty of Cyprus, which he could easily do, then I'm afraid that that will create, that will not be acceptable, I suspect, to people in Cyprus. But we need to watch this. But as I said, we should be concerned about it. I don't think we should panic about it yet.
Peter, is George, there's a lot of talk right now, George Soros, is George Soros a scapegoat in a lot of what goes on?
That's a good
By
question.
demonizing him.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's got his fingers in a lot of pots. Everybody knows that. But using him as a scarecrow, I think Mark mentioned it earlier. I mean, everyone's looking for political theater. I'm not defending George Soros and what he does with his money, okay? I mean, here's a guy that believes in quintessential democracy, but he puts his thumb on the scale on so many things in so many places. He's an impediment to democracy in the true meaning of the concept. But yeah, I think he's being used as a scarecrow. I think he's just being put up there. What it does is just, it inflames the debate and things like that. I don't approve of those kinds of things. Mark was very good at enumerating the different groups that are involved in this, and I think that's something that we should focus our attention on more. And just trying to I mean, it's like demonizing Putin for everything or something like that. I don't like that kind of politics. That's just bad. That's vicious PR, and I don't think it gets us anywhere.
Mark, do you have a take on how Soros is, I don't want to say scapegoated, but obviously his name comes around with a lot of, whether you go from Ukraine or the coup in Ukraine to what's happening with the Caravan in the U.S. What's your take on how the media perceives Soros?
In Ukraine, as far as we know from the documents that that have been leaked, actually the oligarch Pierre Omidyar, another liberal oligarch, actually bizarrely the backer of The Intercept, where Glenn Greenwald and Jeremy Scahill do good work, and some other people have been brought in basically to fight against their own work there. But Pierre Omidyar was more involved, as far as we know, in Ukraine than the Open Society Foundation and George Soros. I have a different take on this. I don't think that George Soros has been scapegoated enough because of the level of responsibility he is. I don't like oligarchs messing around in politics, especially in other countries. All right, you just can't allow that, right? It has to be thankfully put a stop to most of it. Other countries need to enact the same thing. If the United States, if the people of the United States want to let George Soros meddle in their democracy with money, I know they have this bizarre idea that money is free speech in the United States. It's their bizarre conception of what they call democracy, but the rest of the world doesn't and should not follow suit. The biggest problem with George Soros is you're not allowed to criticize him without the anti-Semitic card being played, simply because.
Exactly.
My problem with him isn't that he's Jewish. My problem isn't that he's a neoliberal oligarch who meddles in other countries' politics, right? And when someone says, "Oh, Soros is a secret message, a hidden message," it just means Jews. Well, what kind of conception do you have of Jews if you think everyone who adheres to the Jewish faith is a neoliberal meddling oligarch? Because that's not my conception of people of the Jewish faith. I have quite a good conception of most of them. My problem isn't with Jews. My problem is with George Soros. And I think he needs to be called out for what he does and how wrong it is as loudly as possible in every country in the world. Him and all the others like him.
And to echo what Mark is saying, this is find outable, okay? It's not that hard to find out about these things, okay? The fact is the liberal media in the United States doesn't like to talk about it, okay? And George Soros does ally with Western governments at times, okay? Against their own allies. So
not just Soros, the Koch brothers, Axelrod,
etc.
Right, left, all the oligarchs out of politics.
Mark has got it right. Money is free speech. I mean, that was a tipping point, and if there was ever a democracy in the United States, that was definitely going in the wrong direction. Oh, there's a cat.
It's a cat. Yeah.
Alexander, good, because this €5 super chat is for you. Is it correct to say that the City of London and their later founded East India Company is today's deep state in the US?
The City of London is not the deep state, and the East India Company, of course, doesn't exist, and all of that. But can I just say, there is a deep state in Britain. It is very highly connected, very highly, with the deep state in the United States. The two are heavily integrated with each other. And of course, the City of London, that is the business community, the financial community in the City of London, is extremely heavily and closely integrated in Wall Street. Indeed, I remember when I was in New York quite some years ago, it was a strange feeling. It was like going from one part of the same city to another with New York and London, the two financial communities. It is not the British, however, who control the United States. That is a complete misconception. They don't have that kind of power. Politically, the influence, if anything, is the other way around. But if you are rather speaking about a sort of supranational group of people, Anglo-American group of people, an elite group of people who share very similar philosophies, who are involved in very similar activities in their respective countries, who support each other in their respective countries. We were talking about George Papadopoulos earlier. The British spied on George Papadopoulos at the request of the United States, for example. And we've spoken in earlier programs about the British role in organizing the Russiagate scandal in the United States. If we're talking about all these connections and of this sort of supranational body of people who are not accountable, then I think we're talking in an accurate way, rather than about the British controlling the United States, or even to a certain extent vice versa.
But they certainly did meddle in the election.
All right. Yes, they did. All right, guys, we are approaching 2 hours, almost 800 people online. $10 super chat from Bobby. No question. Thank you for that super chat. We also got a $10 super chat from RJ. Thank you for that super chat. We'll take a couple more questions. This one is for Peter and Mark. Which countries, Peter, you go first, and then Mark, which countries have the most advanced bioweapons programs?
I'll kick that to Mark.
You'll kick that to Mark? All right, Mark. Which countries have the most advanced bioweapons programs?
Yeah, well, of course, a lot of that is hidden behind the doors of deep secrets, but I think we can be pretty confident that the countries with the greatest bioweapons, research are up heads and above Russia and the United States first, obviously. Russia probably with a close second behind. But, we shouldn't sneeze at Israel and the United Kingdom and China either.
All right. And we'll take one or two more questions. And this is to all three of you guys. We'll start off with Alexander, Peter, Mark. Just jump in, guys. Who would replace Putin? All three guests. Who would you like to see to replace Putin?
This is the most popular question. This is the most.
Everyone's interested in this, but who would you like to see? Let's start with this one, Peter. You go. Who would you like to see to replace Putin?
Someone like Putin. Okay. No, the thing is that I've said this before, but it's worthwhile repeating again. You can distill Putin's time in high politics down to two pillar policies. Okay, reform and sovereigntization, working together, and that needs to continue under his successor. Who will it be? I don't know. I think that as we get close to the end of his tenure, that we'll identify certain individuals, and I think that he will anoint more than one, maybe up to 3 or 4, and then he's going to say, "Go out there, boys. Maybe a lady too. Go out there," because that will be basically the Putin legacy to continue. Who will be the best to continue this legacy? And I think that's what would be presented to the voters. I think that's a very smart way of doing it. a very smart way.
Who would like to go next?
Yeah, I'll take, I'll just jump in. First of all, who to replace Putin? Putin. But of course, his time is, he's on his last term of office. It will be, difficult for Russia because he does such an excellent job of not only truly getting the sincere support of the Russian people, but managing Russia's different elites, institutions, and power sectors. He's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I've got plenty of criticisms of him, but in relative comparison, compared to many other countries, I think he's an extremely good and effective leader. If I had to, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, my first choice would have been Sergei Ivanov. I have, because of Putin, I have an immense trust in the political loyalty of the Siloviki, of the Russian security services, to defend Russia, right? Unlike people like Gorbachev and the others who sold out heart and soul and ideologically to the West. But he seems to have dropped out of politics because of the tragedy in his family with his son's death. My second choice right now, I would have to go with Shoigu, the Russian defense minister. And I would, particularly because he would be great because he's at least partly non-ethnic Russian. He is Siberian blood, indigenous. And I, for that reason alone, but, he's proven himself a very effective manager of the modernization of the Russian military. And he's really appealed to the Russian people, when on Victory Day, he entered as in the Russian Defense Ministry vehicle, to salute the president and salute the troops. And when he passed under the gates of the Kremlin, he made the sign of the cross. That, despite being the fact that he himself is not Orthodox, he comes from, Kalmyk Buddhist, Siberian roots. And Russian people knew that, but they saw that as a gesture of respect, and the respect that the Russian faiths have for each other. And I think right there, he showed the political instincts to not only be an effective defense minister and manager, but to be a good politician for Russia and, the various Russian peoples, all 200 plus ethnicities and 5 different major faiths. And he would be my pick if I had to go and vote and he was running tomorrow.
Alexander, let me before you answer, Alexander, here are what some of our viewers are saying. They're saying Shoigu, they're saying Maria Zakharova, they're saying Lavrov, they're saying never Kudrin.
No.
What's your take, Alexander?
Well, it isn't going to be Kudrin. I mean, I think that, there are some people who would want to see Kudrin. That would be a coup.
That would be a coup.
But it would require a coup. That would be a massively unpopular move. I mean, even if Putin supported him, I can't see him consolidating his position. I can't see it happening. I'm going to repeat 2 points that I made many times whenever this question comes up. First of all, the Russian political system has become much more structured than it used to be. There is now organizations like the Security Council. There are institutions like the military, the intelligence services, the big economic blocks. I think we will see a stability in policy. There will be a sense of change when Putin goes, but I don't think we will see any drastic change. If we're talking about who is the most charismatic and effective and capable minister in the government now, I don't think there's any question about it. It is Shoigu, Sergei Shoigu, who is the defense minister, who I would add, by the way, is a civilian. I think I'm right in saying that. I think, despite the fact that he wears a uniform, he is a civilian, and it is striking how effectively he's managed to work with the military despite having a background as a civil engineer. I think he would be the popular choice at this time. I am sorry to say I don't think it is going to be him, because I think Yes, I think at the time when Putin goes, I think he will be quite old. He'll be in his 60s, mid 60s or late 60s himself. I think he will probably want to move on. I don't think it's anybody we actually know.
He's a prime candidate to be head of the Security Council and things. I mean, he's going to be an experienced set of hands, a mentor. I don't think he's going to disappear. Okay, I think he's still very close to.
Yes. Now, as I said, who it will be, I'm going to be very frank about this. I just don't know enough about Russian politics and at the top, who is at the top of the Russian political system to start making guesses. I'm almost certain at this point to be wrong. The last time I did make a guess, which was back in 2008, I thought it was going to be Ivanov, who was Mark's choice, and it turned out to be Medvedev instead.
I got it right, and I was so angry that I was right.
Well, there you go. So, I mean, you know, having made a mistake once, I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to repeat that experiment. But I think, as I said, that we will see a continuing continuity in direction. There will be the lack of the flair that Putin has brought to it. And can I just say something about Putin? I mean, Putin has grown into his job. He is not the same Putin that he was in 2000. I remember him very well at that time. I remember what a nervous person he was in some ways.
He's a liberal.
He was a liberal, and his policies were very, very much wanting to be close to the West at that time. So Putin is not the Putin that was back in 2000. So, you know, one has to always bear that in mind too. But I'm not going to try and guess who it's going to be. But I've said my view. I don't think we're going to see radical changes, and whoever it is going to be. It's one thing for them to become president. It'll be another thing entirely to see whether they establish themselves in that role. Putin achieved it. Medvedev, thankfully, didn't. So let's also bear that in mind.
Always remember, it's not Putin's Russia.
It's Russian.
No, it's not.
Putin.
Russia, Putin is the president. Putin is the Putin today that the Russian people needed and wanted him to be.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I'll let you have the last quick word before we go. We're at 2 hours. We're 800 viewers, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you very, very much. Mark, everyone's asking, what about Lavrov?
Yeah, no. Lavrov is an incredible foreign minister, Niet, as they call him in the West. He so embarrasses his Western equivalents, right? It's almost embarrassing, right, to see him dance circles around the. He is a true and career diplomat. He is he is an icon of the Russian foreign ministry, right? He's what every foreign minister around the world should be, in defense of his own country's national interests diplomatically and professionally. But I do not believe that he has ever had political aspirations. In fact, there was a lot of speculation that he would step down as Putin took his new term. He may still yet. He's old, he's tired, he's done his duty. He is a family man. He would like to spend more time with his family. And I just don't believe that he has the nature that is required for politics that requires you to be elected and appeal to.
He doesn't have a power base. The very nature of his job dictates that he doesn't have a power base. That's just the way the position is made. So there's no power base there.
I don't think Putin's government would have been half as effective over the last without Lavrov. But Lavrov is not seriously being considered, or I don't think he's considering himself to step into the political ring as a future presidential candidate himself. It would be an interesting to see, but I just don't think he wants to, or that it's going to happen.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Guys, we are over 2 hours. Thank you very much to everyone who tuned in on this live chat. It was a great show. Thank you, Mark, as well, for joining us for this live chat. Guys, pick up a t-shirt. You know the drill. Go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt. It helps us out. Donate to our PayPal and Patreon pages. It also helps us out. And to everyone that sent us a super chat, thank you very, very much. Peter, any last words as we enter the midterm week? A big week ahead.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that later. I want to move in with Alexander Mercouris. He's got a cool house. I like that. Okay. My dogs like it too. Okay.
Mark, any words, any thoughts this week? What are your last words before we close out the live chat?
I mean, of course, you have to watch the midterms, but I'm so sick of American political theater. My mind is always what's going on in Syria and what Erdogan is getting up to in Idlib, now east of the Euphrates. I'll keep one eye on the midterms and one eye on Syria.
Alexander, it's great to have you back again. Yes, your house looks very, very cool indeed. What are your final thoughts, Alexander?
I am actually interested in the midterms because, I mean, America, when all is said and done, is a place where things change, and we will see. But I also think we've got to keep an eye on where the economy, not just the U.S. economy, the world economy is going. And I will be very interested to see how that reacts to the news of the midterms, because we've been seeing all kinds of problems in the markets, and the stock markets have been going up and down. Interest rates are going up. If Trump consolidates his position after the midterms, if the Republicans hold the House, how will the markets react? How will that work into U.S. policy? I think there's a lot to look into that.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Thank you, Mark Sleboda, international affairs and security analyst, also a frequent guest on Crosstalk as well. And Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, also a frequent guest on Crosstalk as well.
And Alexander Christoforou, also a frequent guest.
Guys, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. I hope everyone has a great Sunday. Take care of yourselves. And we have a big news week ahead, and we will be covering that news week ahead. So subscribe to the Duran, click the like button, share the Duran with a friend. We really appreciate everything you guys do for us. Until next time, everyone, take care.
До свидания.